So I'm going to skip past the asset register and borrowings because those pages are exactly the same as that we just looked at. Obviously, make sure asset register is up to date, update your outstanding amount and any loans that you've got. That then allows us to move into adjustments. So this is where we start to differ from receipts and payments to income and expenditure. Two main things. Firstly is the VAT stripped out. And secondly, we can enter in adjustments. So things about timing, creditors, debtors, etc., we can show in here to make our accounts more relevant to the time period that we're dealing with. Now, as I mentioned when we were looking at the VAT, remember that the VAT adjustment based on the closing position on the VAT summary will become an automatic adjustment in Scribe between your box 7 and box 8 if you are working in I&E. You do not therefore need to enter a VAT adjustment in here because it's dealt with for you, and that's why it's so important that you make sure that figure is correct. Here is where you would enter anything else that you've got. So as the process goes on now, you might start wanting to look at the invoices that you get for March. If you know they're not going to be paid until the new financial year, you can start reviewing them. If they relate to things that have happened in March, then you might want to think, oh yes, I want to enter a creditor adjustment for that. Obviously, you might want to apply some level of amount that you want to deal with, so over £50 or something. If you're getting very small invoices, do you want to enter adjustments for everything? So be clear and consistent on that. And also think about the regularity of things that you might be dealing with. If you end up with 12 salary payments in the financial year, generally that's fine unless there are any huge fluctuations. So it's not always necessary to adjust when you're receiving things on a monthly basis if they're in arrears, if you're still ending up with an annual cost within the accounts, i.e. 12 months for or a single cost as it may be. Obviously, if things are changing considerably, you might want to adjust for them. So it's about thinking about what effect is this going to have on my accounts? Do I need to show it? So once you've identified some things that you want to adjust for, you need to enter them in here. And you do so by clicking on that blue plus button at the top. So you can see I've got some in here already, but I'll show you how we add in a new one. So fairly self-explanatory, okay, as you can see here. So firstly, we need to tell it the type of adjustment that we're dealing with. So just to recap on that for you all, creditors, we have received goods or services in the financial year, but we're not going to be paying for them until April or later. We've got an invoice, we know the value, but we're not going to be paying for them until April or later. Normally, because of the payment approval process, it's going to push it forward. But we want the cost in this current year because that's when it was incurred. That's a creditor. An accrual, similar, but we might not have the invoice at this point. We know we've had some work done. We're expecting to need to pay out for it. We haven't had an invoice, therefore we're going to accrue, estimate an amount that we owe for that work. Prepayment is the opposite. We've paid some money out in this financial year, but actually it relates to next year. So we've paid for some work to get done. Whatever happened, it got delayed. It's now going to take place in the 26-27 financial year. We therefore want to move that cost forward. Debtors, customers who owe us money. We've provided goods or services to them and they as of yet haven't paid us. So remember, we need not just invoices you've raised that are unpaid, invoices that you have raised that are unpaid that relate to the current financial year. If you invoice ahead, so you've invoiced it in March for, say, room bookings in April, they're not debtors because they are relevant in the new financial year when they're actually going to have the booking. Okay, so be clear on how you deal with it. If you invoice in arrears, i.e. after the events happened rather than in advance, you're much more likely to have debtors. Receipts in advance, so this would be the opposite of that, where you've received income in this financial year that relates to next year. So in that scenario, if your customer has paid you, they've made a payment to you in March, but you hire your venue to them in April, their cost, the income of that, should appear in April because that's when the hiring is taking place. Therefore, receipts in advance moves money that we've had in this financial year and puts it into the new one. Okay. And then we've got a 2 at the bottom that are slightly less relevant, but still available to you, not used as often. Stocks and stores. So if you're holding some stocks, but actually you haven't used it and therefore you want to move the cost, you can do so. Let's say you've got a great deal on toilet rolls for your venue and you bought in a huge bulk, but now you've got loads left over. You want to move the cost to when they're actually going to be used in the new financial year. You can use that. And then finally, doubtful debts. So doubtful debts can only be entered if you have a debtor adjustment. So what you're saying is, Mr. Jones hasn't paid me £1,000. He's had the goods or services in this financial year, it's unpaid, I'm owed £1,000. But actually, I don't think it's going to be paid, and therefore I can also enter it as a doubtful debt. So what we're saying is, yes, we're owed some money, but actually I don't think it's going to be paid, and therefore I want to show it as doubtful. So although it's income owing to me, it's not necessarily that we're going to receive it. So that would almost be a pair there to represent that part of it. So in this scenario, we'll just have a creditor adjustment. We can then enter the date, so either the invoice date or you can just use the 31st of March. Cost center and cost code. So what code does it relate to? Where do you want to show this cost in this scenario, or this income, or reverse this from? So let's say we're having some work done at the town hall, repairs to the door. There's something happened to the door. We've had it fixed, but we've got the invoice, but we won't pay it until later. So let's find an door fixes, that's useful. So, and remember as well, it's the net value. So we're just dealing with the net amount that we owe. So in this scenario, we had to pay £250. There we go. We add that in, and you can see it's appearing. So you would just keep going through that process of identifying things you want to adjust for. As I said, you may want to start to think about invoices that you're receiving, because probably most of the time it's going to be creditor adjustments that you're considering, but obviously give a thought process to other things where there's timings that you want to move around. Once you've done that, you can go to actions in the top right hand corner and view report. Now, I'd strongly suggest that you do this, because the nice thing about this report is that it's going to tell you what it will do based on that adjustment. So you can check that what you're expecting to happen is going to happen, because I have seen examples where people get their debtors and their creditors mixed up and they put them in the wrong way around, and then things are happening not as they want to happen. So if I enter a creditor, I'm going to increase my costs because these are things that I should have paid for in this financial year. If I've got a debtor, I'm increasing my income because my customer owes me this money. If I've got a receipt in advance, I'm reducing my income because that income relates to next year. So I want to take it out of this year and move it to next year. So you can come and check what this looks like to make sure you're happy with everything. So I'm just briefly going to pop into here just to mention temporary assets, to say there is an option to add work in progress or temporary lendings onto the balance sheet, but I have never seen anybody use it. As it says in red there, if you've got any doubts, leave it as red. So I will just pop into there to say that I don't think anyone will need to go there just as you're working through the list. The other thing, just before we have a look at the effect of that, is to mention the year-end debtors report as well. So this here is intended to assist you calculating your debtor adjustment. Scribe will not use this report to enter your adjustment figure. Again, this is something we got questions about. So I've got my year-end debtors report, I'm not seeing it as a debtor on Scribe. No, it will not do that for you. And the reason it does not automatically create them is what I just mentioned in terms of how you invoice your customers. If you invoice in advance, a lot of the things that you will have owing at the end of March wouldn't be relevant to be a debtor, because if you're billing people for hire or whatever it may be in April or beyond, they are not debtors because the income is relevant to the new financial year. So if they haven't paid, fine, you don't need to worry about it. The issue will become if you have got customers who haven't paid you for goods or services that you have provided in the financial year. So they have hired the hall, but you invoice in arrears after the event has happened, but they haven't paid. At that point, they would be a debtor. So this will list all the unpaid invoices at the 31st of March, so you can come and have a look exactly what's going on. But remember, you do not just take that figure at the bottom here, because it's not necessarily correct. Okay, so this is in sort of assist you here, not just taking the figures that you see on the report. Okay, it might be that you don't have any, as we said, if you invoice ahead. Okay, so that then allows us, and let me calculate that because I've obviously added that adjustment and we want to update that accordingly. So that will pull that through. Now, the best place to go and see the results of those adjustments and see the reversals of last year is by running the working document. So this is very important to run and understand in here. Make it a little bit bigger so we can all see. Okay, so this is our report, the working document. It breaks it down across income and expenditure across our cost centres. So this is the conversion from receipts and payments to income and expenditure shown on a report. Column A our receipts and payments here. So these are the values that we entered in the financial year based on the transactional stuff that we've been doing. We have then got our reversing adjustments from last year, so they will reverse accordingly. And we've got our new adjustments for this year. So we've had some things in there. The town hall's got a couple of things. I think what I added in there is added in there as well. So it is accounting for that based on what we've done. So we had a debtors here. So these are the things we're adding in because we want more income in allotments because our customers hadn't paid, but we're reducing something here because we had some hires ahead of time. So then what we've got in the final column are our new income and expenditure figures based on our starting position, reversing our adjustments, adding our new ones in, and here is our new figure at the end. So this is now our income and expenditure values, so we can map that through. If you've got your adjustment report, you'll be able to see the values. Obviously, they'll be summarised because this is at cost centre level, but you'll be able to see the ins and the outs of exactly what's happening. And if you had Scribe last year, they'll automatically reverse from what you entered. If this is your first year on Scribe, you would have entered them as your opening balances, so they will come in here as a total. If you haven't allocated them out, you will see a restated figure at the bottom, which will allow you to show the total, because if you haven't allocated your opening adjustments, or if this is your first year, Scribe doesn't know the code, but it will show them so that the calculation is correct there.